Welcome back to CS++. This is our 8th and final video in the Intro to Programming Using JavaScript series, and we're going to talk about the date object today. So the date object, we'll learn we can use some different methods to get things like the year and the month, the day of the week, the time, and then we can use something called internet time, which is the number of milliseconds that have passed since January 1st, 1970, which at first might seem kind of weird, but we'll see how we can use that. And then we'll also look at two methods that exist called setInterval and clearInterval, which will allow us to start calling a function every X number of milliseconds, and clearInterval, which will stop that repeating function. And we could use some of these things to get the change in time over two certain events on the web page. And then we'll do a little assignment. We'll start with a warm-up where we just get the day of the week, and then we'll convert it to a string, and then we'll print the date as month, day, year as numbers with slashes in between. And then we will create a little counter that counts up from 0 and a start stop toggle button, and we'll be able to change the text on the button as well. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to know is how to create the date object. If you see here, there's a new keyword here called new, N-E-W. We haven't used that before, but what this does is this creates a new object from a class. And classes, the naming convention is that they're going to start with a capital letter, and then you're going to see some parentheses. And in this case, we don't need any information in these parentheses. Another class that we've seen throughout the series is the math class, which also started with a capital M. So usually if you see something with a capital M, that is usually a class. And what's going to happen here is this is going to save into a variable. So now this right here, now, is your object. So you can use now dot any of the methods that belong to the date class. And it's very important to realize as well that when you do this, whenever this line happens, it's saving a snapshot of the date from your system clock. So the current year, or the hour of the day, or the number of minutes or seconds. But that will happen. So if you try to go get the date and time from now later, that will still be now because this is a snapshot of the time. So you can say new date again, and when you say it again, that will give you the snapshot at that current time. So you can see some methods here: get full year, get month, get date, get day, get hours, get minutes, get seconds. And then here's get time, which is a number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. A couple things to note too is these are all integers that they return. So the 4-digit year makes sense, 2025. Get month, we can see this was in April, so this was 3, but April is the 4th month, so January actually is 0. So it is a 0 indexed language, so January is 0, December is 11. For day of the month, this would be something between 1 and 31, so if it's the first day of the month, that would still be 1. Get day, it's indexed at 0, so Sunday is the first day of the week, so Sunday is 0, and then Saturday would be 6. Get hours is going to give it to you in military time, so after midnight would be 0, and then 11 p.m. would be 23. And then minutes is going to give you 0 to 59. One thing that you might want to think about here is if it's below 10, the minute might be 0, 1, 2, 3 as a single digit. So you might have to concatenate a 0 in front. And same with the seconds. So we'll check those out when we start doing the assignment. But setInterval and clearInterval are going to be very useful. You can call setInterval by itself, but if you want to be able to stop that interval, you want to save that into a variable. So in this case, we're going to save it into timer ID. And what's going to happen here is you're going to say setInterval, and it's going to take two parameters. The first is going to be a function, and the second is going to be how many milliseconds you want that function to run. So if you had a function with no parameter, you can just put the name of the function in here. Or like we've done before, you can use an anonymous function or an arrow function, and then you could fill this comment up with as much code as you want. And this would make it run every 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. If you wanted to stop it, all you would say is clearInterval and then the name of the variable that holds that set interval. And then we can also do a elapsed time. So we can take a snapshot of the time, and you can daisy chain this. So you can say new date, which gives you a snapshot. And then you can say, just give me the get time, the number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. And then later on in your code, you can do that again. And then all you would have to do is subtract the current time and the start time and divide by 1000 to get it in seconds. So let's start with the assignment by first going to index.html. And let's open this up in a browser to open that port. And then once that loads, you will see that we have some stuff already there for us. The current date, the elapsed timer, there's the timer, there's the stop button. And if we come back here, if we close this and then just open it back up, we can run this all through code spaces now that there's no alerts or prompts. A couple things to note here is there is an ID for the warm-up called warm-up date. For current date, it's called my date. The timer is called my timer. There's a button that we have to add an event listener to called my btn. And then this is just calling that JavaScript file. So if we hop on over to script.js, we can now work through these things. So again, we want to make sure that we use an event listener like we learned before and not an on-click, because we don't like mixing the JavaScript and the HTML. We want to keep everything in the script.js file. So step one here for the warm-up would be to create an array of all of the days of the week. So we can do let days equal Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and that would be it. So now that we have that, we can just say, well, now these numbers are going to represent the get days. So getDay of the week is going to give you 0 for Sunday. So what we can do is we can just say, grab the first element or the 0th element in the days array. So before we do that, we got to go grab the date. So we can do we'll call it today equal, and now we can create a new date object using the new keyword and then capital date with empty parentheses. And then if we want to print this to that place on the HTML document, then we have to go grab the element first. So document.getElementById. And we said that was called warm update. The capital U, capital D. And we want to change the text in between that thing. So we use text content. And then all we have to do is say, go and grab the days array at element, and then we can go grab today, which is the date object, and we can call the method getDay. And getDay gives you the day of the week. And that is a method, so make sure you have those empty parentheses. And you should be able to refresh this right here and click on, well, you don't have to click on anything because it just shows up. So it just changes it to Friday. And you can see that this was being filmed on a Friday. So the next one we want to look at is how we can print it in month, day, year. You can see that I put all these steps together. You can have copy and pasted the array from here if you wanted to. So all of those steps are right here, and you can follow those step by step if you want. So moving on to part one, we're going to do something like 4/2/2025, and we want no leading zero, so not 0402. So again, we could have used the today from earlier. So let's do that. It's already created. So let's save these all as variables, and then we can just concatenate the variables. So we'll do let month equal today, which is the date object, dot getMonth. And you can see a bunch of different get methods from here. There's other things that you can look up and see what they do. So getMonth, and that has empty parentheses. And remember, that starts at 0, so January would be 0, so we want it to be 1. So we want to shift everything over by 1. So we'll add 1 to that. And then we can get, so we already got the month. So if you want to put them in the actual steps, the next one is to get the the day, or get the day. So this would be like the 3rd. So this would be let day equal today dot get date with a capital D, and that would give us the correct date, right? So the 1st is 1, so we don't have to do anything special to that. And then same thing for year, so we can do let year equal today dot get full year. And again, that would give you 2025 or 2026 or whatever year you're in. And then what we can do is we can print it using the ID myDate, which you can see here. So that would be document dot get element by ID. And again, it's myDate. And then we want to change the text context of that. And we want to set that to month, and then concatenate a slash, and then concatenate day, concatenate another slash, and then concatenate the year. And this doesn't get triggered by a button, so we just hit refresh, and it shows up with the current date, which is April 3rd, 2026. Okay, so that is the date object, and now we'll use the internet time to get a snapshot of that, and then we will see how much time is passing. So we need to get a start time, which is going to be right now. And there's actually another way to do this as well. So let's see what step we're on here. So record the start time using the new date. I'm going to give a little bit more room here. This doesn't need to be so wide. So for this one, step 11, we're going to have to go grab the current time. So we'll call this start time. And then there is another thing that we could do, which is just the date object. And we can actually say .now. And if you hover over this, this will tell you exactly what it does. It returns a number of milliseconds since midnight January 1st UTC. So this does the same thing as what we saw earlier with the method over here, which was get time. So it's just a little shorter way to do the exact same thing. So this is kind of like a math method where you can just say the name of the thing. You don't have to say new. So just another way to do it. You could say new and then use get time, but this is also a nice way to do it. So let's also create a couple more variables. Let's do elapsed, so how much time has passed. And let's start that with 0. And then we have a button to start and stop it. So let's create a Boolean to say, is it running or not? So running, and we'll say yes to start, it will be running. So that's true. And we'll use those in a second. So now what we have to do is create a variable to hold that set interval. So you can call that whatever you want. Let's call it timer interval. And we're going to set that to the setInterval function, which again is going to take 2 parameters. One is a function, and one is how many seconds you want to pass every time it gets run. And we want a delay of 10 milliseconds, right? Instead of every 1 second, we want to actually see this timer running. So the first thing is the anonymous function. So function, empty parentheses, and then you can open up some braces. And in here, we are going to first figure out how much time has elapsed. So this is elapsed equals, and we can take the snapshot of the date again, or the time again. So this is date again dot now. So a snapshot of the milliseconds when this interval gets called, and we can subtract it from that starting time. So since that starting time is outside of everything, this will only happen when the page first loads. And then if you want that in seconds, you can divide by 1000. And then this is a little tricky, but as soon as this method ends, this function, you're going to put a comma after the brace, still inside the parenthesis, and we want to go a 10 millisecond delay. And that should do it. Let's see if we hit refresh. Our timer is not moving yet. So let's try to debug why this is not working. Because we're calling elapsed. Oh, we're not printing elapsed anywhere yet. That's why. So before we do that, let's print elapsed. So document.getElementById, and we want to write this on my timer, which is, if you look at the index.html, there's one called my timer, which is just an ID, which is the 0.000. And we want to change the text content of that. And we want to set that to the elapsed time. But we also want to make sure it only has 3 decimals, so it looks like a clock. So elapsed time .to fixed. And in this case, we're going to do 3. So now when we do it, it will also show up. And you can see a timer here, counting up. And the final step is going to make this button work. So start, stop. So that's part 3. So for this one, we need to, and we can refresh this if you don't want that to be running. Oh, it's going to run all the time. So it'll just be running on over there on the right side. So for this one, we're going to have to add an event listener to this button. So to do this, we can create that event listener using document.getElementById. The name of the button was my BTN with camel case BTN. And then we can do addEventListener. And then we want to do it on click again. So just click inside of quotes, which is all lowercase. And then we can create that anonymous function. And then in this function, we can do all the code to make this start or stop running. So the first thing we want to do is we want to grab the button ID just so we can change this to say stop and start. So what we'll do is we'll create a variable, we'll call it BTN, and we'll do document.getElementById, and then we'll just do my button again, my BTN. And this will just hold, instead of having to say this whole thing every time, we can just say BTN now. It's kind of like a shortcut to it. And now we want to do all this stuff on step 14. I'm going to keep it up here just so I don't lose my closing brace right here. So the next step is, if it's running, what do we want to do? Well, we want to stop it, and we want to stop the timer. So what we can do is we can say if it is running, right? So when we click the button and it is running, what do we want to do? Well, running is a true-false value. So if it's true, then what we can do is we can stop the timer, which is clearInterval. And then we have to put the name that we save that as. And up here, we save that as timer interval. So clearInterval of timer interval. And then elapsed, we want to change that, right, again, to figure out what the time is, because we want to make it stick there. And we don't want the elapsed time to keep moving, right? So we want to take a little snapshot of it so we can use it later. So date.now minus the start time again, same as before, and then divide that all by 1,000 to get it in seconds. And then we want to change running from true to false. So we can say running equals false, because now it's no longer running. And we want to change the button BTN, the text context of that, which is what it says on the actual button. Right now it says stop. We want to change it to start. And that should be it if it's running. And then otherwise, if it's not running, we do an else statement. What you don't want to do is another if statement says if not running, because what you're going to do is you're going to make it be running and then switch it to false. So then the next if statement would trigger. So an else or an else if would be needed here. So to resume the timer in here, we can grab that start time again. So start time equals date.now minus elapsed, which we took a snapshot of a second ago. And then we're going to multiply that by 1,000. And then we have to set the interval again, right? So to set the interval again, we don't have to create let again, but we basically have to do this exact same thing right here, except without the let. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to paste it in right here. Tab it over to look nice. And then when that's done, you set that interval and then it's running again. So now in the else statement, you're going to say running equals true. And then the last step is to change the button text from start back to stop. So btn dot text context equals stop. Now let's refresh it and see if that works. So now our timer is running, and we can try to stop it at exactly 5 seconds. And then you can hit start again, and it should start going again. And now you can play a fun game of trying to get exactly a certain time. All right, so that is it. So let's see if we got this to work. So I'm going to click on my source control, give it a commit message. I'm going to commit it and push it. And then this will send it back over to github.com. So committing it saves it locally to code spaces. And then pushing it sends it back to github.com. And as soon as you push something to github.com, it will trigger an action, and that will trigger the self-grading. So again, you can click on this yellow dot, this gold dot, to see if it's working, or you can click on actions, and then you should see your commit message up at the top. And then again, you could click on the auto grader here, and you could open it up and dig into all the different tests it's doing. So especially if you're failing one and you can't figure out why, there might be some useful information that you can kind of dig through in there. So that's kind of a useful tool, just like the debugger console is, by right-clicking and saying inspect when you're on the actual web page. So as soon as this finishes, you're either going to get a red X, meaning that at least one test failed, or a green check mark, which would only happen if all of the tests pass. And in this case, all of them do pass, and we get 100. So again, this was the date object, so creating it using the new keyword, a bunch of different date methods, and then how we can set and clear that interval to call methods over and over again. So that was it for the 8 units. And the next step is going to be to make the guesser game. And then that will be the next video. I'll see you then.